It was a cool, crisp morning during my most favorite time of the year, fall, before anyone in the house was awake. We hear this fierce knock at the door. 6 armed police officers wearing bulletproof vests were waiting to get inside. I crack open the door as I wipe the sleep out of my eyes, and I'm feeling the pounding of my chest because I'm so terrified. And I listen as they inform me that they have a warrant to search my house. The only thing I could respond with was, please, don't scare my babies and just let me wake mama up. Their response was a command: do not go upstairs and stay where we can see you. So with the calmest, prayerfully most convincing voice, I yelled upstairs to the kids to come on down to meet me in the living room. And by that time, Mama was already coming out of her room. My kids and I were sitting in the living room, and we can hear the officers upstairs turning over furniture, looking for every piece of evidence that they can. They collected our computers, cameras, cell phones, to include my children's homeschooling devices. At the time, I had a 22-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 6-year-old, I'm not done, a 3-year-old, and of course, baby Grace, who was 7 months old and still nursing. I also had 3 foster children. And let's not forget Mama. Mama was already suffering from dementia. See, I went from the comfort and the care of Mama to the comfort and care of my husband. At the time, I was married to my high school sweetheart over 20 years. We married 10 days after my 18th birthday, and a year later, we began making babies. 6 babies later, my husband, a retired veteran, a highly decorated man within our community, was arrested for lewd and lascivious acts with a minor younger than the age of 14. This person we knew very well in our church, and he was sentenced for 9 years and 4 months. 9 years and 4 months? 9 years and 4 months? What am I supposed to do with 9 years and 4 months of my life? Well, the arrest and the sentencing of my husband spun my world and the world of my children into the most darkest and the most loneliest place I've ever experienced in my life. And first came the threatening phone calls, the emails, the hate letters, private chats on social media. Then our name was dragged through the mud. And we would go to the stores and parks and churches, and people knew us. They knew what happened to us. And it got even worse when strangers started to recognize us. Because I later realized that my family photo, the one that we hung in the family living room, was plastered all over the place. Sure, my kids' faces, they were blurred, but you could find my family photo in the newspapers, on the news, in social media, and Google. I had to think, how did we get here? And where was our life supposed to go from here? Well, I stand before you with a Master's of Business Administration from CSU SM. I have a reliable job, and my kids and I, we're doing good. And hey, I'm here talking at a TEDx event, right? I would love to tell you that this is my resiliency story, from marriage to arrest to TEDx event, because then my resiliency story would just be beautiful. Some could even say it smelled like roses. But my resiliency story is far from that. My resiliency story is repulsive like the jagged laceration, the one where the white flesh is exposed and there's blood and fluid seeping out. In fact, my resiliency story is stinky, like the rotten flesh and pus coming out of an infected wound. My resiliency story is really lonely. Like the times that I would drive to the nearby churches in my community, and I would sit in the parking lot, and I would yell at God, God, if you are real, you will bring someone here to me right now and give me some encouraging word. Only to find myself exhausted from crying and screaming for so long, and nobody ever came. And my lonely resiliency story quickly turned into an embarrassing and a disgusting one. Like when I, a former pastor's wife, allowed men to use me, and taking the abuse from men and the self-loathing. And why? Only to find some type of relief from the loneliness that I felt in my heart. Let me tell you, it didn't work, because after that, I was shunned by my church. And this time it wasn't because of the sins of my husband, but because of the sickening relationships that I chose to have. That's when my resiliency story got loud and physically painful. When I would get a wrench or even the heel of my cute shoes and hit it against my skull harder and faster until I didn't feel the pain in my heart anymore. It only got worse. It's got stinky, like the stench of the flesh on my wrist as they burn against my good candles. And this was because I couldn't stand to look at my kids' face when they asked me where their dad was at. Me, a former pastor's wife, an inspirational speaker, a counselor, a first lady even. That's what they called me. First lady, you're so strong and you can handle this. Oh my God, how I despised those words. Didn't they know that I was suffering? Couldn't they hear me crying on the inside? Tell me something that I can hold on to. There I was, left with a jagged, infected laceration, alone with my 7-month-old colicky baby, and wanting to be nursed when my own weight dwindled down to just above 100 pounds. Many days I didn't get out of bed, and I left my 17-year-old daughter to raise her baby sister and the rest of the siblings, and to take care of the household affairs, all of them. Other times I was 3 o'clock in the morning out looking for my own 13-year-old wayward child. But most of the time, I just wanted to lay down and die. Lay down and die. Lay down and die. Oh my God, look at you. A female woman with 6 kids, who's going to want you? No work experience, a Latina with no education? Just lay down and die already. But I learned something during that time about life. I learned something about life. I learned that life does not have to end with one event. Of course, unless that event is death, and then we have no choice. But these events, they did not have to define me, and they did not have to control my future. I also learned that healing can take a really long time, and it can even leave scars. But my healing began to be sweet and my scars beautiful. I realized that there were 3 things that I needed in order for my resiliency story to work. I needed something to hold on to. I needed to learn from others. And I needed to time my mourning and regret. Something to hold on to that was healthy. Some days, I would just hold on to just the small thought that just maybe, my kids still needed me to be their mom and not someone else. Other days, I just surfed the wave on what other people believed in me because I no longer had anything to believe in. And some days, I just relied on the small miracles of life, like when groceries were donated when we were struggling. And some days, I held on to the small miracles of life, like when groceries was donated to our family when we were struggling, or a smile from a complete stranger. Learning from strangers, not like church leaders or professors, but learning from those strangers that you find on the streets. Most of us have seen them. We would like to be able to call them crazy. They talk to themselves, they ask themselves a question and they answer and they listen, they flail their arms. I learned that that was valuable for me. Some days I would say this daily, hourly. Some days it was over and over, like my life's mantra. Angelica, you have a choice. You can lay down and die, or you can get up and live. I choose to live. I choose to live. Yes, I am now single with 6 kids and a mother with dementia. I don't have any job experience and I'm a Latina with no education, but I choose to live. Listen, resiliency is not meant to be pretty, and you don't have to know what to do at every stages of your healing. Just because you failed and 2 and 3 years later you are struggling doesn't mean that you're not resilient. No, it doesn't matter how long you're in the situation. Your story is still valid and you can still heal. See, I went from a deep cut that developed into a stinky, infectious pus to obtain my beautiful scars. Why beautiful? Because they remind me of the healing process that made me stronger. I'm not the same woman that I was before. And resiliency is a process that demands a change. My scars are beautiful because you know what? They reminded me that after the 9 years and the 4 months, and I'm still going through this messy battle of a divorce, I am still resilient. And in the most unbearable moments, when I experienced the PTSD of my husband standing in front of me and raising his voice and making demands of me, I am still here, I'm still healing, and I'm still resilient. In fact, this is what resiliency looks like. To include my scars, because they remind me that the more I travel through this story, the more confident I am that I can recover. And I have a choice. Today, I choose to live. Today, I choose to be resilient. And so can you. Thank you very much.